My name is Sommer Panage, and I'm an engineering manager at a major tech company in California. It's a huge honor to be here today. It's my first time at Mobiconf and my first time in Poland, and I absolutely love it. Thank you so much to the organizers for having me. So, on February 4th, in 2015, I filled up my backpack and 2 reusable grocery bags with everything from my desk at work. There were photos of friends, I had a jellyfish mood lamp, and a lot of peanut butter. With my bags filled, I turned in my badge, my laptop, I said goodbye to my manager, and I walked out of the Twitter offices in San Francisco for the last time. At that point in my career, I'd been working as a software engineer for about 5 years, and I'd just gotten the title of senior iOS developer. But I decided it was time for a change. So I packed my bags, and I ran away to the circus. Or, as I like to tell people, I decided to pursue a career as a full-time acrobatic performer. But whatever you want to call it, I had no idea where this would lead, or if I would ever be able to come back to programming or tech again. Now, let's fast forward 2 years, 1 broken arm, and over 2,000 hours of training and rehearsing and performing. After all of that, I did the unthinkable. I joined a startup. And I've been back full-time as a software developer and an engineering manager ever since. And the thing is, I don't think that I'm alone in this whole career-changing adventure. Millennials, or adults between the ages of about 22 and 37, they're already stereotyped as job hoppers. On top of that, a recent survey found that 46% of the people in this age group expressed the desire to change their industry in the next 10 years. Now, that's not just changing jobs, that's changing their entire career. And this effect was especially pronounced among people in the field of technology. And other similar surveys by other groups found even higher numbers when asking similar questions. Generally, as lifespans increase and as the age that people are retiring increases, the number of people having 2 or even more different careers is also going up. Also, while millennials are having fewer children and having children later in life, in the end, most people in this age group still do want to have families. And in fact, almost half of millennials are already parents. And of course, having kids can also mean taking time away from one career to pursue your family life. And finally, sometimes life just happens. Maybe we get sick for an extended amount of time, or a parent falls ill and needs care, or a partner or a spouse needs to relocate. Maybe we go through a divorce. But whatever it is, whatever happens in our lives, this can require changes in our careers as well. So what about you? Maybe you're thinking of stepping away from tech for a while, or perhaps you're considering changing careers. Maybe you're just coming back to tech and you're arriving from somewhere else in your life. Whatever your personal path is, my hope is that maybe there's something useful to you in my meandering story of the mistakes I made and the lessons I learned when I moved out of tech, and then I came back into it. So we'll begin with leaving. Why and how did I end up leaving my job at Twitter? So why? That's the easy part, right? There was something else that I wanted to do. Now, I'm pretty sure, if pressed, a lot of us could come up with a why good enough to leave our current jobs. In my case, I wanted to work as a professional acrobat before I was too old, because there is a bit of an expiration date on that career. And I knew that if I didn't at least try it out, I would really regret it. By the way, that one's me. Anyway, now the how of leaving my job, that's where it gets a little more complicated. Because it's one thing to want to leave. Many days I felt ready to walk out the door and just float off to the next thing. But to actually do it, to actually leave, now that took some work. Because before I could just quit, I spent 1 or 2 years trying to plan and just figure out how on earth I could do that. I wanted to be sure that I had the tools I needed in order to at least have a chance of succeeding in the new path. The first thing I needed, of course, was training. Every career on earth requires the right kind of training and preparation. Now, in my case, I wanted to work as an acrobat. At the time I started considering quitting my job, I'd already been training as a serious hobbyist for about 7 years. So the first thing I did was I looked at the people in the industry that I wanted to go to, and I asked myself, am I realistically at their level? Do I have enough training to enter that field as a professional? Now, in my case, that didn't mean just having acrobatic skills, it meant having dance and theater and juggling. And as much as I wanted to think I was good enough for my new career, the most valuable part of knowing if I could really try to take this leap was talking to others in that field. I asked mentors and coaches and collaborators, do you think I can succeed as a performer? These needed to be people who could be brutally honest with me. And if the consensus was that I wasn't going to make it, I needed to be prepared for that information. Finally, some careers require a graduate degree or a certification that would be difficult to attain while working another job. Now, to be a performer, you don't have to have any degree, but you do need a certain type of preparation. Your body needs to be prepared to be exercising 6 to 8 hours a day. And that was something I couldn't simulate while I had a full-time job. So I realized that part of taking time away, part of quitting my job, was also to just train full-time before I could even try to get the next job in the next career. I wasn't going to get a full-time job in my new career right away. Now, having the right training for your next career is really important. It's important because, of course, you want to succeed in your new career. But what does success actually mean? In my case, I had thousands of ideas of what it could be next. So in order to define success, another tool that proved massively useful was a box. And by that I mean boundaries and parameters to define how this transition would take place. These boundaries and parameters created a definition for the process of changing careers. Any new pathway or career can have many milestones as it develops. However, it all begins by reaching the first goal. Now, when you're changing careers, that could mean finding that first job, or reaching a certain level or pay grade, or maybe it's just passing an exam to get ready. So for me, I thought about the many possible targets that I had, and I realized that I had to be very, very specific, because otherwise I could easily end up spending years just wandering around in this new, vast career space. So did I want to be a performer in a nightclub? Did I want to perform at parties? How did I want to be a performer? In the end, I decided that my definition of success would be to get a contract with a tour for a traveling show, because that's what felt like the most important objective for me. Now, every goal can take some time, especially if it requires additional training first. A career transition might not mean getting a job on day one. So the next thing I did was I drew a line in the sand for myself. And I set myself a time boundary for this process, because I knew that getting a contract would not be easy. I'm not sure if you've noticed this, but there aren't that many traveling circuses around these days. So keeping that in mind, I gave myself 1 year. 1 year to get used to full-time training, to start working in the field, to audition, and hopefully get that big contract. Now finally, the trouble with setting clear goals is it's possible that you don't meet them. So what happens then? Do I keep trying? Do I give up? Is this new path just not for me? Well, in my case, I definitely needed to be realistic. I might not meet this definition of success I created. I'm an okay acrobat, but I'm not the best. I needed to be ready to fail. So if at the end of 1 year, if I hadn't signed that contract, then what? So I decided after 1 year, I would have a reevaluation period. If things were going well, meaning I was feeling healthy and I was getting small jobs, but just not a big contract, then okay, I'd give myself 6 more months. But if things weren't going well, I wasn't getting many jobs, or I was injured, well, then I decided it was time for me to think about what I'd done and maybe consider going back to my old job. The next tool that I had to take stock of in order to change careers is probably the most obvious. It's money. Major life changes often require money. Whether it's a career change or whether it's having a family, financial choices are going to be involved. As I mentioned earlier, my path from leaving tech began many years before I left. Once I knew that I wanted to leave, I started thinking about what it would take financially to make this change possible. So I started by asking myself about the worst case scenario. What if I don't make any money? I just don't find any jobs. How long can I support myself safely and account for all the costs I will incur with this transition in my life? Part of the reason I gave myself 1 year was also because the financial math worked out as well. The next question that I asked myself is, okay, now let's say it's not the worst case scenario and I start working in my new field. What's the pay range in my new field? Will that be enough to support my current lifestyle? What changes do I need to make in order to make this a viable pathway? Now, you might have already guessed this, but you don't go into the circus to get rich. And so I had to be realistic here. I would be able to make ends meet, but my lifestyle would definitely have to change. Now, since every transition takes time, another important question was, is there a way for me to generate income on the side while I'm ramping up in my new career? Now, this is where we, as people in technology, we're really lucky, because it's pretty easy for us to generate some income on the side. I figured I could take on some small coding projects, or maybe do some consulting work for about 10 hours a week without risking my new career. And this could help provide for some of that extra income to help me make that transition. Finally, the last tool that I wanted to be sure that I had was personal support. In other words, friends or family that would be there for me. In any major transition in life, there can be hiccups. Even if we think we've got it all planned, life can throw us a curveball. And in those moments, it's good to know that we've got support. Now, up until this point, life had been pretty linear for me. I'd gone to school from kindergarten all the way through grad school, and then I immediately got a job. All of a sudden, I was about to pull the stability rug out from under myself. I had no idea what this would be like, but I figured I would probably want some support if it was going to be half as scary as it sounded. So first, I just took stock of my relationships. Do I have a loving partner? Do I have a supportive family? Do I have helpful friends? Maybe a therapist or maybe mentors, whatever it was that I felt like would be helpful. Who can I call when times are tough? Initially, I recognized that a lot of my friendships were actually tied to my career. So a lot of the friends that I had in my life were the people from tech that I went out with after work, my mentors, my friends, the people that I went to conferences with. But those friendships would realistically atrophy once I wasn't at my job anymore. So I began reaching out to more acquaintances in my new career scene, in the acrobatics scene. And I wanted to build and strengthen those connections. Because friendships and acquaintances in a new field or a new area, that can help create a social bridge to ease the transition. But more importantly, it can also provide professional connections that help you get up and running. So that was the toolbox I set out with: training, some clear goals and some boundaries, a realistic financial plan, and some really good supporters. With that toolbox in hand, I quit my job and I embarked on the next chapter. So what was it like being outside of tech? Well, as I mentioned, I gave myself 1 year to meet my goal. And here's just a really quick look at what happened during that year. So in February, I quit my job and I began full-time training. By March, I was getting small weekend work and I did my first audition, but I didn't get it. Still, I learned a lot and I got a lot of feedback that helped me feel like I was on the right track. April brought more training and another audition. I didn't get that one either. Luckily in May, I got a big show. It wasn't a tour, so it didn't meet my criteria for meeting my goal, but it was pretty great. Unfortunately, the show was very hard on my body, and I came back home with a severely injured shoulder. I had to take the rest of May and all of June off. By July, I was back to training again, and I headed out to Barcelona for an annual acrobatics convention. In August and September, I was back in town training and doing small weekend work. Since I wasn't getting any bites on my audition videos, I used October to make a new audition video. And thankfully that helped, because in November I got another real show. Again, it wasn't a tour, but it was something. I spent December training hard in Mexico, but I trained too hard because I broke my arm. And I spent all of January unable to train. At this point, it had been almost a year. My time was almost up, and it seemed like all hope was lost. But out of the blue, at the end of January, I got a call and was asked to take a contract during that year for a 4-month tour. So on February 4th, 2016, 1 year to the day after I'd quit my job at Twitter, I signed my first contract. Now, I still had a broken arm, so it wasn't quite the contract I thought it would be, because I would be managing the tour until my arm healed, and then I would have a small performance role. But to be honest, it was the best thing I could hope for, given my circumstances. Now, there's a few things I'd like to point out about that whole first year away from tech. I spent a lot of time injured, and I thought about giving up a lot. Being unable to work for large stretches of time was really hard on me. So having that support network of friends and coaches and mentors and people in the field to remind me that this is actually part of the new life. This is one of the taxes you pay. That was really helpful, and I don't think I could have done it without them. Now, secondly, during my transition, I spent a lot of time not working yet. Most of my time was spent training and traveling to train. And that's where having that financial cushion came in really helpful. And also having that backup plan to do a little bit of tech work on the side to make up some income. Now, if I just ended the story here, I'd be looking pretty okay. I met my goal just in time. I prepared pretty well with the whole support and financial planning thing. But there was also a lot that happened when I changed careers that I hadn't really fully anticipated. And I think I can best summarize it by some advice that a friend gave me right before I quit my job. She said, "Summer, you're gonna have to prepare to be unprepared." And yeah, there was a whole lot I did not see coming. There are a lot of aspects of changing careers that I hadn't anticipated, or perhaps I hadn't seen how much they would impact me. Every career or chapter in life has its own day-to-day routine. The first thing I noticed when I changed careers is I went into this training mode, is that all of a sudden there was no required structure to my day. And this realization was jarring. My life in tech had been pretty structured. Weekdays involved waking up early, going to work, going to the gym, maybe seeing some friends, going home. Wash, rinse, and repeat. All of a sudden, I had 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to fill. I had to structure my own training time, my teaching time, I had to book my own performances. Nothing was there for me to rely on. It was all up to me. Now, if you're a freelancer, you might already be familiar with some of these struggles, but it was a very rude awakening for me. So here are a few things I learned that helped me get through that transition. One thing that really helped was creating a daily schedule. I set clear times for being at the gym, for being at dance rehearsals, for meals. And I didn't just set these times in my head, but I put them in my calendar. Having that physical reminder of exactly where I should be when helped it feel less like I was falling through the void. I also asked for help. I found buddies who went to the same spaces that I did, and we set up times to meet so that we could each be accountable to each other to be there at the same time every day. Another thing that really helped for me was to clearly mark the start and the end of my day with a morning and an evening routine, and to structure my weekends differently than my weekdays. So, for example, every morning I would get up, I would journal, eat breakfast, and have coffee. And every evening I would wind down with something relaxing like TV or a bath. And weekends I set really different schedules, and those schedules also included some unstructured time. And doing all this made kind of this whole void feel a little less monotonous. Now, another thing that I didn't really anticipate when I was thinking about leaving tech was that I would really miss tech. As the phrase goes, the grass is always greener on the other side. Now, it's not to say that the moment I left, I was so sad and I missed it so much, and I wanted to go back. But after being away for a while, I was able to more clearly see what I had enjoyed so much about being a software developer in the first place. In the end, I think missing tech was a really good thing for me. First of all, it helped me appreciate my work as a software developer more. I realized how much I loved using my brain to solve hard problems every day. And I noticed how much I missed the people and the meetups and the conferences and tinkering with Swift. And, confession, I actually cried when I watched the WWDC keynote that first year because I was so sad that I couldn't be there. The feeling of missing tech also gave me motivation. It motivated me to stay engaged. Now, even if I didn't have time to code a lot, I could still read blogs, I could still read articles, I could tinker a little bit in my spare time. I could even push myself to take on some of those side projects that would end up bringing me that little bit of extra income that let me survive. And of course, all of that helped me stay in the loop in case I ever wanted to come back. I think when I quit tech to pursue performing, I made a mistake that perhaps a lot of people make when they're about to make a huge change. I thought, oh, everything's going to be better now. But every field comes with its own pros and cons, its own joys and its own challenges. The tech and the performance worlds are different, and one isn't necessarily better than the other for me. Now, here's a few differences between those two worlds. Some of them are obvious, like different pay and different schedules, and different people. Now, this one might seem obvious, but it didn't feel it. Now, of course, I'd known many people in my new career before I quit my job, but I was training as a hobbyist, so I only saw those people on evenings or sometimes on weekends. All of a sudden, I was with these people 24/7, or at least most of the time. Lunchtime conversations were now about casting calls and injuries and physical therapy. I wasn't talking about bugs in video games anymore. And in fact, my interest in technology and in programming it was considered really weird to my new coworkers. On the other hand, when I wanted to talk about box juggling, they were really excited about it. So being immersed in a group of people with very different interests and values than the ones with whom I'd spent most of my life, it definitely required a big recalibration. Finally, a different type of work or a different career requires a different type of energy. Now, as a programmer, we mostly use our brains, and we often work alone. At the end of the day, for me, I would usually be pretty high on social energy. I'd have a lot of physical energy, but my brain would be fried. Now, working as a performer was the exact opposite. At the end of the day, my body and my social energy would be shot. I just spent 8 hours sweating and talking to people and interacting with everyone at my gym or in the rehearsal. The last thing I wanted to do was socialize more or do anything physical. I just wanted to be alone and quiet on the couch. In the end, moving into another career or a different life chapter is going to be a big change. And despite feeling like I'd prepared pretty well, there were definitely a lot of social and energetic aspects that I just hadn't accounted for. Now, you might still be wondering, okay, so I got the tour, I met my goal, how come I came back to tech anyway? So I'll finish the story. Yes, I got the tour and I toured the country with this troupe, the Acrobatic Conundrum. And after the tour was over, I started getting back into training hard, trying to get that next contract. But after a couple months back, I decided to come back to tech. And there were two main reasons I decided to return. The first boiled down to demands. Every job, every career requires different things from us. Being a parent requires a lot of patience and caregiving. Service workers often have to be very social and work with people all day long. So in my case, I had chosen an industry that required me to use my body as a means of income. And this was really, really taxing, more than I realized it would be. At my age, injuries were already becoming more common. And I was always either trying to prevent an injury or recovering from one. I realized that my whole life I'd been someone that loved being fit and active, but on the side of something else. In other words, loving something as a hobby didn't necessarily make it the right career for me. But I think the different demands weren't the main reason that I returned. I think if that had been the only issue, I probably would have found a way to make it work. Because in the end, I did love it. I loved performing, I loved touring, I loved the whole new career. But there was always something nagging me, something in my gut telling me that I wasn't doing the best thing I could do for me, for my skills, and for my abilities. This led me to ponder, what does it mean to want something out of a career? When I reflected on the things that I wanted in a job, 4 key features stood out. I wanted to do something that I personally enjoyed doing. I think we all do. I wanted to do something that had a broad impact, something that improved the lives of others in a way that was meaningful to me. I wanted to be sure that I was using as many of my strengths and my skills as possible. In other words, I wanted to be doing something that I was good at. And finally, the job had to provide income and a stable life for me. Because in truth, in order to do my best at something, it's important that my basic needs are met. So as it turns out, I'm not alone in wanting these things in my career. There's a term in Japanese that represents this notion. The feeling of doing something that is all at once something you love, something you're good at, something the world needs, and something you can be paid for. The term is ikigai. And if you Google that term, you will see recently there's been no shortage of blog posts and articles on the topic. So I won't spend too much time on it, but I encourage you to look it up. When working as a performer, I found that I was clearly doing something that I loved, but the other parts of me just weren't feeling as fulfilled. I do believe the world needs arts and performance, but I just didn't see the impact I could have, as big as I had felt the impact I could have in technology, especially in my favorite field of technology, which is accessibility. And truth be told, I'm a better engineer than acrobat. It actually just matches my skill set better. And of course, income instability was really challenging. When I looked back at the tech jobs I'd had, they felt closer to meeting all of these needs. Now, of course, every job in technology is different. Not every one of them is doing something the world needs or that I believe the world needs. But I felt that given the right job in the right field, I'd get closer to the center of this diagram. When I decided to come back, I had to, of course, find a job. Now, after 2 years away from technology, I was really nervous that folks wouldn't want to hire me. I began reaching out to companies, and it was clear the gap in my resume was a concern. Because of that, I realized it was important for me to have a really clear, cogent explanation for why I'd left and why I was coming back. I had to explain clearly and concisely and confidently my reasons and my choices. It also helped to make sure to include how I'd kept up on tech blogs, how I'd maintained a few coding projects on the side. That way people knew that I wasn't coming in cold. A couple places that I talked to tried to argue that after my time away, it wouldn't make sense for them to bring me in as a senior engineer anymore, even though I'd already reached that point in my career previously. To counter this, I reminded them once again that I had not lost track of technical progress. I also realized that it was helpful to discuss the skills that I had learned while I was away, because a lot of those skills could translate into tech, things like team leadership and management. And finally, since I was primarily talking to companies in the health and fitness space, I argued that spending 2 years immersed with performance athletes left me uniquely suited to have product impact. Finally, once I had again gotten a coding job and I was working full-time, there was yet another period of culture shock. Hellos were once again just spoken, and they weren't hugs and kisses like we did in circus. And it was no longer acceptable to talk about graphic injuries at the lunch table. But I also had more of a set schedule and fewer social interactions, so once again, there was a reacclimation period. At the end of the journey, I got the job, I went to the small startup, and then I finally came to the larger company that I'm at now, and I focus on my biggest passion, which is accessibility. So am I glad that I left tech and went off and lived as a circus performer for a few years? I definitely am. I think I would have regretted not trying out a different career. Am I glad I came back? Most certainly, because I really love the work I'm doing now. And would I do it again? I think if I had the right reasons, I think I would. Because the thing is, even if I didn't end up on stage somewhere traveling the world with Cirque du Soleil, I'm glad I gave it a try, because in the end, I came back and I had learned so much. By stepping away from the field for a while, I learned to appreciate it more. Being a software developer, since I'd graduated, I think I'd taken many aspects of it for granted. But being in technology is really great. It turns out that I really love coding because there's always something to learn. Whether it's picking up a new language or going from Objective-C to Swift or from Java to Kotlin or learning new APIs, being programmers, we're always learning something new and we're always trying to expand our skill sets. That's why we're all here. And not every field involves the kind of problem solving that we as engineers get to do. Hardly a week goes by where there's not some interesting thing to debug or some performance problem to fix. As developers, our brains are always cranking. And as software developers and designers in the tech industry, we are all in this really amazing position to impact the quality of life of others. If you have some topic or some cause in this world that's important to you, then there's probably software in that space that you can work on. Upon returning to tech, it was clear to me that I either wanted to be working on health or fitness or accessibility, because those are the things that I care most about in the world. And it felt like my skills could have the biggest impact there. Immersing myself in the world of athletic performance also taught me about another field that wasn't tech, the field of athletes and performers, and understanding how they lived, how they cared for their bodies, what kind of health issues they confronted became invaluable knowledge when I worked in health tech. Additionally, working in another field allowed me to try on other hats. Because I had to work as a tour manager when I had my broken arm, I learned how much I liked people management. Now, I had never suspected I would want to be a manager, but after getting thrown into a role, I realized that it was a skill that I had and that I wanted to hone, and I wanted to try it on for size back in the tech world. And finally, I learned a lot about myself. Not just about my career, but about me. For example, I learned that I can live out of a suitcase and a backpack for months at a time and eat mostly canned food with a plastic spoon. But more realistically, I learned that I'm an introvert. And when the cast of the show would go out after a day of performing or rehearsal, I would see my social energy at a massive low. Now, being in one career and one path my whole life, I'd never been forced to confront that thing about myself. Now, coming back from all that, I'm better able to recognize and take care of my own social needs. But the biggest thing that I learned is that I still have a lot to learn. Because when I'm doing tech full-time, like now, I still long to have more time to perform and to train. But when I had all the time in the world to do those things, then I really missed coding and I missed solving all the hard problems. And right now I have that full-time job, and I'm teaching and performing on the side. But truth be told, the balance, it still isn't quite right. In the end, leaving tech taught me a lot about the career I thought I wanted. And having the career I thought I wanted taught me a lot about the career I'd already had. And many of the lessons I learned while I was away made me better at the software industry when I came back. And I think that whatever big change comes next, it's probably going to teach me a lot too. In the end, we're all here at this conference because we want to learn. We want to learn about new technology and design patterns and programming paradigms and product management. And sometimes it's hard to know where this desire to push ourselves and to keep learning will take us. It might not take you to the circus, but maybe it'll take you to medicine, or to Antarctica, or to parenthood. Or perhaps for you, it's just about diving deeper and deeper into the career you have right now. I have no idea where your journey will lead you, but my hope is that some of the lessons that I learned from my meandering pathway can help you take the next steps on yours. Thank you.